Welcome to the Infra Insider podcast from Infra-Be, a leader in renewable energy and infrastructure executive search. Join us as we dive into insightful conversations with industry leaders, pioneers and visionaries shaping the future of infrastructure and renewable energy. Discover the latest trends and innovations and challenges driving the transition towards a greener and more resilient future. Please remember to like and subscribe. Today I'm joined by the CEO of Aurora Utilities, Simon Reilly, a company operating at the centre of one of the UK's most urgent infrastructure challenges. From AI data centres and EV charging to housing and industrial electrification, electricity demand is accelerating rapidly, but the grid infrastructure needed to support it is struggling to keep pace. Aurora Utilities is an independent distribution network operator, otherwise known as an IDNO, and operates in the critical part of the network that connects major developments to power. Their work helps developers access electricity faster, more flexibly, and with more commercially driven approach than traditional routes often allow. In this conversation, we'll explore why grid connectivity has become such a major constraint in the UK on its growth, how private infrastructure players are reshaping the market, and whether Britain is genuinely prepared for the scale of energy demand coming from AI and electrification over the next decade. Simon, welcome to the Infra Insider. It's an absolute pleasure. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. Very good. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Did the introduction do Aurora justice?
It did. You explained what IDNO stands for, which is always a pretty good start. Not a lot of people haven't heard of it, so I spent a lot of time explaining what we do.
It's an interesting one, and to be honest with you, over the last 12 months, I hadn't come across them very often, but they are now very much so in the market, and I'm sure you've got competitors that we won't be talking about today. But it's a very interesting approach, which is what we're going to talk about today. But Simon, we've known each other for a few years, well, almost 10 years actually. And it's interesting how your career has progressed, starting out at EY, then moving into Evershot Rail, and then you took one move before that, didn't you?
Yeah. So I've been working in the energy sector since 2017. So I joined a gas distribution network when I was there, and it's there that I first discovered the world of IDNOs. So I guess my route into that was through property development. So we were doing some property development on old gas holder sites, and rather than just selling on the new developments that were done on those sites, which are a mix of commercial and residential, I thought, well, why can't we own the new connections for these assets? And that's where I discovered IDNO and IGT, which is the gas equivalent, and acquired another IDNO IGT business that had just set up and represented my own company on the board of that for 4 or 5 years, and built that up, and really saw the opportunity in the market. And I think the great thing for me in terms of why now, why another IDNO, is the scale of the demand for new connections, and that's really underpinned by sort of 3 or 4 things. And the key for me is the ability to pivot in that market. So what I took to investors 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago with Aurora, is now slightly different in terms of what our business plan is now, because it's moving so quickly. So my investment thesis for creating Aurora was around electrification of heat, electrification of transport, and electrification of industrial commercial, decarbonisation of industry effectively. And what's come into the mix since that has really been AI and the need for data centers. So that was part of my thesis, but not the main part at that time. But now it's front and center. So, and we saw that sort of 5, 6 years ago during COVID, when COVID struck. We'd been involved in the previous business, the previous idea I was involved with, and the focus there was on housing. And of course, when we went into lockdown, we stopped building houses. So
So
the one thing
is that what convinced you there was a real opportunity there?
yeah, well, at that point, we pivoted into EV charging and then saw the opportunity to connect EV charging hubs to our network. And it was that opportunity around the ability to pivot. The demand for electricity connections is so great across so many parts of the industry that I just thought this is a real opportunity here. We really need this investment to be, for UK PLC to be competitive from a, AI perspective in terms of being an attractive place for data centers to come, but also for renewable energy, more affordable bills. I just felt that, there's a real need for this. And that's reflected in numbers. In 2024, more than 80% of new connections in the UK were adopted by IDNOs. So it's not just about Aurora, it's about the whole sector. There's over 20 IDNOs now. And they're adopting the vast majority of new electricity networks in the UK at the moment.
So for people who are unfamiliar with the space, what role do you actually play in getting those major developments connected to power?
Yeah.
And why now? Why it's so critical now?
So the first part, in sort of layman's terms, what an IDNO is, we have a license with Ofgem, so we are a regulated body. We have an ability to connect new developments to the electricity grid. So ultimately, anything that's built, a house, a factory, a data center, a solar farm, an EV charging hub, anything that needs a plug, either in or out of the grid, we're able to connect them to the grid. So we would enter into a bilateral connection agreement with the local DNO, so that's the local electricity network. So your SSEs, your Scottish Power, these sort of UKPN. We would enter the bilateral connection agreement with them, and then the new assets, so the cables, the substations, the transformers that are built to connect that new data center, whatever that asset might be, we would then own and operate that on behalf of, and so we would then collect the revenue that is generated, so that our revenue comes from the electricity suppliers, so the likes of Optus or whoever's providing the electricity to that end user. They pay us a distribution charge. We collect that and we give a portion back to UKPN because they've also got some of that network. So we are the regulatory body that owns and operates your new electricity network. And why is that different to what's happened previously? Well, we do things a bit quicker. We're a bit more flexible. We take a collaborative approach. I'd say ultimately we're more customer focused. So what I do day to day is try to understand what my customers' needs are. So when I set up Aurora, the things that I saw that weren't working in the previous IDNO I was in and other IDNOs was that there was a lot of sort of bought-in skill sets. So land rights, design, delivery, that sort of thing. A lot of O&M as well was people use third parties, so quite small management teams who were
so is
didn't have that.
Is that what make, obviously I can see where the conviction came from in terms of the real idea, but is that what differentiates you from the other IDNOs?
Yeah. So when I was setting up the business, I took I read a lot of books. I read a lot of and watched a lot of things that other entrepreneurs had come up with about how to create a successful business. And actually, the guy that set up Pinnacle Plumbers is actually, I don't see myself in the same sector as him quite, or in the same style. But he came up with a quote which I kind of quite like. He basically said, if you want to get a successful business, go into a business, understand how that industry and that business works, identify the areas that are done badly or could be done better, and then set up an adjacent business and do those things better. So the things he saw in the plumbing industry were the plumbers turned up all scruffy. They had, old vans. They didn't turn up on time. So he, created smart uniforms. He bought
Mm.
new vans. He turned up on time. So the things that I saw as failing for our customers were land rights was taking too long. 6 to
Yeah.
12 months to get land rights approved, and that was killing projects, particularly in the renewables
Mm.
and EV charging space, because they were relying on
Yeah.
outsourced capabilities. Design was being held up. People weren't, IDNOs weren't doing the design approvals quickly, and that was causing things to be held up. And there wasn't really an ownership to the delivery of the building of the assets. So the things that I said, right, what I want to do differently is I want to build an in-house legal capability for land rights. I want an in-house design team and I want an in-house delivery team. And that just means that we're on call for our clients. So if they need us, we've got the capability and skill sets to
Mm.
respond to them now, and we just get things done quicker.
So you basically I suppose what you have done is you've created a better experience for the end user.
Yeah, the way we work is we try and get into our customers as early as possible in the process, because the earlier they connect, that they speak to us, the
Yeah.
more value we can add. So we talk about being an extension of their project team. So and quite
Yeah.
often with developers, they've got a very small team, money's tight, they're doing things quite often at risk. So where we can provide some, capability to actually, we'll do your land rights for you, and we'll build that into the asset
So are you
value that we pay.
are you doing more than what the average IDNO is doing?
Yeah. Yeah, we're providing a wider scope of services. There are other competitors of ours that have those that
Yeah.
in-house capability, but for a sort of a business at our stage in our development, we've got a much bigger in-house capability than you would expect.
So
Um,
it's more of a consultative approach.
yeah,
Okay, that's
but
interesting.
we don't charge the consultancy fees. We basically see that as a cost of sales. So we basically say we'll do that work, and then on the basis that we'll win the contract to adopt the network that you're building.
No, that's fabulous. So everyone's leaving, very happy, very satisfied. And I imagine that a lot of these things, there's lots of bottlenecks, and it's probably quite difficult to get around them. But obviously, you know what you're doing, and you're advising accordingly. And we talked about developers. Lots of my clients are developers, building teams across the UK and Europe. And it's always been about focusing on energy generation. Um, but to use the word again, there are so many bottlenecks in grid infrastructure. What is actually going on behind the scenes? Why are we in this position now?
I think, I mean, I could talk all day about this, but to try and make it succinct, the challenges we're having now with the grid and the constraints around getting access to the grid are because the grid was built and designed for something very different to what is required now. That's not to say that the grid can't be used in an efficient way. I think it can.
Mm.
I think it just needs to modernize, and that's not the kind of nuts and bolts of it. It's the policy and the way things are managed and things allowed to do. So if you think back to when the grid was first developed, we were taking large large chunks of power from gas and coal-fired power stations. So generation was on mass, and in particular sites within the UK. So you needed big grid infrastructure to take you from those power stations to the main conurbations, and quite often they were close to the conurbations, so that they didn't have to travel so far. But effectively, the grid was designed such that the main end users were, um, you know, small distribution users, so homes, businesses, that sort of thing. So it's designed for large scale generation at particular sites, and then treat it like a motorway network. So your transmission lines are your motorways, and then
Mm.
you go the power goes at high speed, high volume, over long distances, and then it is broken down into A and B roads, which is your distribution network, and that then takes you the this takes you down to lower volumes, lower voltages, so that people can use it as end users. Um, so that wasn't designed to have, for example, lots of different types of generation going into the grid, solar farms, battery
Yeah.
storage, renewables. It just wasn't designed for that. So, and then on the demand side, we're seeing, so we had Gate 2 last year and
Yeah.
into this year, still going on. That was to try and clear the queue for generation projects who are waiting to get access to the grid so they could put their green energy into the grid. We've now got the same issue with the demand queue. So energy users are now looking to try and connect
Mm.
into the grid. So the likes of data centers, which is driving a lot of this
Yeah. I wanted to.
growth
I did.
in demand, is
Yeah.
they're trying to plug into the grid and take out massive amount, 250 megawatt data centers. Again, the grid wasn't designed for that sort of user. So it needs to change. And to be fair, um, I would say Ofgem and NISO and DESNZ are now working to try and change that. It takes time. And what I would say is being beneficial that I've seen certainly in the last 6 to 12 months is that they are taking a different approach to the grid. So in the past, I think people would probably have suggested that the people managing the grid were not really customer focused. They were
Yeah.
end user in terms of the customer bill. So Ofgem are very focused on, you know, mums and dads in their homes getting, people making sure that it's fair and people don't pay more than they should. But I think what they've struggled with is what is a customer in today's world. And I think what's changing is that they're now seeing actually it's not just people in residential properties or chip shop owners. We need to deal with these big energy users like data centers and treat them a bit differently. So I think we are seeing changes. We set on a number of um, sort of frameworks and engagement teams with the likes of Ofgem. There's one called Connect, which is really actually just focused on data centers. So the objective of that work group is how do we make the grid more compelling for data center and AI users so that we can make UK PLC as attractive as possible and we don't lose out to Europe and other
Yeah.
countries.
So with all of this though, there are these crippling delays
Mm.
that are going on for years, destroying companies. Developers are falling by the wayside. Are you saying then that the delays are a mix of regulation, planning, physical infrastructure, market structure? So there's not kind of one thing that we can point to here. It's a whole mix.
Ultimately, yeah, unfortunately, yes, there are a number of areas that are causing that. First of all, it's the way that the grid has evolved. So the reason that the generation queue got into a mess and required NESO to step in and create the Gate 2 process, and the
Mm.
Gate 2 process was when everyone who had a, a, a reservation in the queue to provide generation had to basically resubmit and reapply for that, and they created hard a higher bar for them to get in. So they needed to have invested in planning process. They needed to demonstrate they owned the land or had rights to the land for the projects, that sort of thing. So a lot of the policy issues that are holding things up now are driven from the fact or mistakes that were made before where they allowed anyone to just reserve capacity on the grid. And people were just reserving them thinking, well, I'll do that and then I can maybe sell that to someone later on for a bit of a turn. So I think that policy issue has been driven from at the time not future proofing the grid and just
Mm.
allowing what would happen at that time, but not thinking what are the kind of consequences of this.
So
And
people were taking advantage of that.
yeah, absolutely. Um,
Have they
they were.
been have they been weaned out?
Yeah, so through the Gate 2 process, where they haven't invested in those projects, those guys will have fallen away. So the projects that have come forward are those where you've got proper developers who are putting money behind these projects, who believe in the projects and are investing in, planning consents, land rights, that sort of thing. So that has worked, but there's other things which have knock-on effects. So, for example, a big area that we are focused on is
Mm.
about supply chain, and that even once you've got your gate two approval, um, people have not been willing to put more money on the line until they've got that approval, which has meant that now be a big rush on the likes of transformers, substations, all the kit that needs to be ordered to develop the
Yeah.
projects. And that can be, you could be talking 2 year lead time on some of these items. And that's driven from, I'll use a technical term, what we call the G81, which is a document which all network operators have. So the DNOs have them, as do the IDNOs. So it's basically an approved list of items that can be used to build a new electricity network for a regulated operator. And what we do really focus on is trying to bring new products onto that list. So the benefit of that is if you can bring in a transformer or a substation or whatever that item might be that has the same output spec and can deliver the same safe, you know, delivery of power as that other version can do that everyone knows, the
Mm.
household name, you can probably get that item for cheaper as a developer, and also your lead time is going to be much reduced. So you're saving cost and time for your project. So we spend a lot of time with looking at new products, stress testing it, making sure that it's safe to use and does what it's, delivers what it should do, to get that G81 wider so that actually people can have a better selection.
So actually, you're not offering just the solution, but you're actually saving some money along the way for the
Yeah.
developers as well, which is an interesting concept, and a good
It,
one to note.
I mean,
There's a
the word I
yeah,
use is we're an enabler. We're trying to enable people get connected to the grid. We're trying to enable the journey to net zero,
yeah.
and by allowing people to use more assets on their networks that we'll adopt, it just enables quicker and cheaper growth.
So we've touched upon AI. We've mentioned it a couple of times in passing as we've just spoken, but there is a lot of hype around AI,
Mm.
um, but not enough discussion around the energy it consumes. Um, are we heading to a point where power becomes the limiting factor for growth?
Yeah, I think we're at that point, and I think that's why DESNZ and NISO and Ofgem have moved quickly to try and come up with solutions to that. So uh, ultimately, if you speak to data center developers, power is the key constraint, and that's across all sectors. Like we're members of the British Ports Association, which is all the trust ports across the UK, and we were at their their annual lunch last month, and the keynote speech was all about, and it wasn't me that gave it. It was the president of the BPA, the British Ports Association. But the keynote speech was about the need for power for them to expand their business and to continue to grow. So yeah, I think we're already at that point, and everyone's moving really quickly to try and make things work, whether that be the policymakers, or looking at alternative ways to power. Um, there's a lot more on-site generation at data centers. I know that's never going to provide all the power for a data center, but every little helps. So there's big opportunities around behind the meter as well.
Yes,
So
it. You've seen a huge growth in a lot of those businesses
yeah,
over the last 18 months. I could name a few, but I won't. But it's an interesting space. I mean, like it's all a bit of a headache. You've obviously got AI data centers coming through. We've also got EV infrastructure, all of this housing scaling at once. When we talk about developers, my mind almost automatically thinks wind and solar, but it's not. It's these players that are coming into the market. Something that I wanted to understand, are all these sectors competing for the same grid capacity?
ultimately, yes, they are. So it all comes down to your location. So if you're a factory in Somerset and someone comes in and wants to build if you want to expand your site there, um, you're going to be constrained by your neighbors basically. So there's the energy use in the surrounding areas. So as I say, if people have reserved capacity for a new EV charging hub or a data center in your area, then that's going to constrain how much power you can get and when. So typically what happens is you make an application to the DNO for the local grid owner for power, and they'll basically just plug the numbers into their calculator and say, okay, you can have that, if you want 10 megawatts or 10 MVA, they'll say, right, you can have that in 2037. What they don't do, which is what we try and do with customers, is to say, well, we can help you do that point of connection application, and we can do what you call ramp up agreements. So it gives you a bit more flexibility. You can probably get some power quicker. So most people just think about, well, I need 10 megawatts for this, edge data center or this factory or whatever it is. But actually, you probably don't need 10 megawatts immediately. You probably build up to that over 5, 10 years. And what you can actually do if you ask the right questions to the DNO and say, right, I'm doing a development here in 2034 or 2035, I need 10 megawatts, but I only need the first two in 2028, and then every 2 years I probably need another 2 megawatts, getting you up to that point. You'll get access to power a lot more earlier than you would if you just said, I just need 10 megawatts. So there's ways and means to do it. So you are competing, but actually, if you're really understand what your needs are, and
Yeah.
everyone ramps up. You never you want to get to 10 your capacity as quickly as possible, but realistically, you're not going to get there. So if you can work with a constrained kind of power agreement or a ramp up agreement, you can get that power quicker. So there is ways around it.
And that's that consultative approach that Aurora offer.
Mm.
I mean, look, you clearly can't solve every issue across the UK grid. I bet you wish you could, and maybe one day you will. We've touched on it, and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I've been very nice so far, but where are you as a business able to move faster or operate differently from the traditional approaches?
I think the key, I mean, we talk about fast, flexible, and straightforward. What we try and do is almost, if you think of that in reverse, a lot of energy or a lot of developers who've traditionally been property developers who, it's only recently that power has been such a big constraint. Not everyone really fully understands how the system works. So we try and break it down as easily as possible. And that's the first step, is actually speaking to these developers or customers, whatever they might be, and say to them, look, what is it you need? Tell me in plain English what your business plan, what your plan is for this site, and when you're going to need power and at what point. And we then will explain to them, right, okay, that this is what we think you should be doing in the most straightforward way possible. Like I just said, two in a year, another two after 3 years, and there you go. And then we try and show to them, look, these are the options, these are the costs, because different options will have different levels of cost, and here's where you can get to realistically at these different cost levels. And we try and give that flexibility. So
Is that different to the traditional route?
yeah, it is. I mean, it sounds really straightforward, but having a flexible outlook is quite different to the way that the grid's been managed before. So um, the reason that IDNOs were created in the first place was because there wasn't a focus on new connections. Because if you think of a DNO or a transmission operator, they're concerned with spending capex, which has been under invested in over the last several decades on the upstream. Getting the power down through the system to the end users. So their focus is elsewhere. So they're getting pushed by Ofgem to bring power from the source, from offshore wind, down to the transmission network, down to distribution network. So if you speak to UKPN, they are focused in upgrading the network up towards transmission. If you speak to a transmission operator, he's spending billions of pounds on getting clean energy from the north of Scotland or the North Sea, wherever it comes in from, down to the major conurbations. They're not really focused in bringing new people onto the grid. That's where we come in. So we're servicing a different part of the market. So as you say, we can't solve the UKPN problem or the transmission problem, but we can get people connected quicker.
So I'm a developer, old school developer. I want 10 megawatts. I'm thinking I need to get my 10 megawatts. I speak to you and you say this is the best approach. Let's go for 2 megawatts this year, maybe 3 next year. Is it a case of once you've got your foot in, it's easier to open out for more?
Yeah,
Or does it not work like
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, I think it does. It won't always work like that, but it will. Things will move, people will give up, and things will come forward. So it's a bit like if you order I'm sure you drive a Porsche or a BMW or something like that, Daniel. So
I obviously it's an EV, an EV.
of course it's an EV. So when you order your new EV and you go onto the Tusker website, whatever it is you use, it might say to you, right, this is available. It's got a 24-week, 6-month lead time. I bet if you order that, someone else will pull out and then you'll get it earlier. It's like that. So once you're in the system and you book some power, the bill, there will be available. There will be movements upstream. People will move, things will get done. Upgrades will happen, and you'll find more power.
Okay. So so in terms of what Aurora are doing very, very differently, it seems like you can work quicker than others, you're very cost effective, and basically you're looking at the complexity of the situation, you're simplifying it,
Yeah,
and you're very much so making it possible. And I suppose that's why IDNOs, we talked about behind the meter, all of these type of businesses are attracting investment from the likes of large infrastructure funds. I know Aurora are backed by I Squared Capital. They're a global fund, they're a global infrastructure investment manager. So that certainly suggests there's significant private investment and appetite for energy infrastructure at the moment. In your view, what are the biggest constraints holding the UK back right now?
I think it's not capital. I think for these sorts of investors. So I've spent the last 20 odd years either advising or working for or working with infrastructure investors, and all they want is to deploy as much capital as possible. Tech, there's an opportunity there because there's demand for new connections, and then they want stable returns. They want to know they don't want surprises. They'd probably rather not have the up surprises and the trade-offs for the down surprises not happening. They just want steady. If you tell me I'm going to get £10 a month for that asset and I get £10 a month, I'm going to be very happy. If I get 8 one month and 12 the other, I'm probably less happy.
Yeah.
So I think they just want certainty, and the things that are working against the UK are certainty around the regulatory situation, political situation, and that all plays into other parts of uncertainty. So the wider macroeconomic position in terms of cost of debt, for example, ability to raise debt. So I think for me, if I think about my strategic risks for Aurora, without doubt, safety is always up there. Safety, we want to be running a safe and efficient network. And if I think about, investment type risks, it is about the regulatory framework and the political framework. So, 2029, we're going to have a very big election, which, could change the way that, people look at the grid and people look at renewable energy. So I think that for me is something that, creates uncertainty. But, what we're doing to manage that is pivoting a little into data centers, for example. So, as I said before, when I first looked at Aurora, it was really around electrification, renewables, that sort of thing. And now we're looking more toward, not more towards, but we're sort of fanning out to have a much more diverse asset base, which includes the likes of data centers and other sort of non net zero type assets. And I think in terms of the regulatory risk, it's about, understanding, where your revenue is going to come from going forward, how certain that is. And I think, you know, we spend a lot of time with engaging with Ofgem and the likes of NESO and trying to, make a case for the need for, network charges to be fair and reasonable without, impacting on negatively impacting on the end users. So, we're not looking for something out of the ordinary. We're just looking to invest in infrastructure and get a stable, low cost return. So yeah, I think for me, those are the not holding things back, but like certainty is good in terms of investment.
Okay, so we've covered off quite a few things, and we're kind of more considering why we are in this situation. What are the bottlenecks? What's holding us back? You just talked about looking ahead to 2029, a big election looming. But within that time, the growth of AI data centers, large electrification, it's expanding, it's blowing up. So what needs to change in how the grid's built and operated?
So I think one thing that I lobby for and talk about a lot is the need for competition. So the IDNO sector was created in the early 2000s on the distribution network because house builders were coming to Ofgem and saying the DNOs are not connecting our new houses quickly enough. We need to we can't meet your housing targets. So they created competition in the connections market so that, it'd be more efficient, more cost effective. IDNOs actually make a capital contribution to developers who, house builders or any sort of developer who are doing a new project to help fund part of the electricity network, which doesn't exist under the DNO model. And as I said, that's in the last 20 years, there's now more than 20 IDNOs competing with each other for these new networks, doing things a lot, quicker, more efficiently, funding considerable capex towards developers to help fund their projects. And, in 2024, as I think I said before, more than 80% of new connections came from IDNOs. So my strong view is that a lot of the issues we're having at transmission can be helped by allowing independent network operators to play in that space as well. So as an IDNO, we're able to connect up to 132 kV, and we can do that on the transmission network as well, only up to 33 kV in Scotland. But in England, we can connect up to 132. So we're already making connections to the transmission network up to 132. But a lot of the constraints we're seeing are at sort of 275 and 400
Right.
kV. So I would like to see a change so that
Why are there constraints at that level?
because they're beholden to the transmission operators, which are like your DNOs, they've got monopolistic power over their different networks. So like your National Grid,
Right.
your SSE Transmission, these guys. So and developers are just really struggling, and a lot of the data centers are looking to come in at that sort of level, and certainly the larger ones. So if you were to create an independent transmission operator license similar to the IDNO, you would have more people in the market who would be able to connect into those. So we're actually working at that level, but as a private network, so we can still adopt a private network off the transmission network at those higher voltages. And the way we actually structure that is we almost turn it into a kind of pseudo-regulated network. So we still charge, what would be the equivalent of a regulated charge. So although it's a private network owned by the developer, operated by us, we effectively adopt it and run it in that same way. And we do that for lots of industrial customers. So the way we look at it is, if you're a developer looking to build a data center, it's not or a large industrial activity, whatever that might be, energy from waste or whatever. Your main role is not to be an owner of an electricity network. That's not your core business. You're gonna have to get people in who are skilled to do that, which is going to cost time and effort, which is going to distract you from your core business. What we try and do is take that away and say, well, that is our core business. So let us manage your assets for you. We'll pay some contribution towards upgrading it. We'll keep it as a regulated asset, so it'll be safe, efficient, easy to use. We'll make sure it's upgraded at the right times. We'll do all the inspection and maintenance required, and we'll treat it like a regulated asset. So we're doing that a lot for, on the distribution network as well, for industrial clients where they, big infrastructure sites, airports, for example, big industrial parks where they don't want to own the electricity networks. So I think by allowing that to happen at the higher voltage levels on transmission would really open up the market and speed things up.
Has the business grown quicker than you thought it would?
It has, yeah, which is great.
I can hear that.
Yeah.
No, that's it sounds like a fantastic business. It's interesting how you started just probably targeting the EV space, and I bet within weeks, things opened up very, very quickly, and I'm sure word of mouth as well, in terms of the solution that you're offering. Do you think like the conversation that we're having around grid infrastructure has fundamentally changed over the last few years, or is it just the same conversation that people have been having?
I think it's, I mean, it's just amplified. It's just like gone from first or second gear into fifth gear in the last 12, 18 months, particularly on the demand side. The generation side's been kind of clogging up over a
Mm.
longer period, but literally, when Ofgem and NESO came out with the Gate 2 process to help, you know, optimize the generation queue and get all the zombie projects out of the way that have just been sitting there, not doing anything. They didn't think there was an issue on the demand, on the demand side that meant they had to do that at the same time. But literally within 6 months, I think I can't remember the stats. I should have written this down before the podcast, but I think during the 6 months where they'd kind of closed the doors for new connections to allow Gate 2 to happen, the volume of connection offer submissions they got from demand customers was something like, a huge volume. It was almost doubling the demand for the grid at that point in the UK. So it's just moved so quickly, and I think that a lot of that is driven from the AI side in terms of data centers because they need so much power. And if you just think about industry as we change, as we move to electrification, the volume of electricity is just massive. So we've been working with a big logistics company. I won't say the name, but you'll have heard of them. The delivery type logistics business. And I think the quote that the chap that I'm working with from there said was that for them to electrify all of their fleet between now and 2035, by that point they'll need the same power as required to turn the lights on in the whole of Bristol, just to
Wow.
keep, and that's just one company's
Wow.
fleet of vans. It's turning those quotes into numbers that you actually think actually the power that's going through these cables is just so much bigger than we ever thought. I mean, just in our, like, we're a relatively new business, but in terms of the renewables projects that we're doing, by 2030, the renewables projects that we'll have adopted, we'll be putting enough renewable electricity into the grid to power all of the houses in Brighton. And
Wow.
we're just a small part of it. So you're kind of creating so much demand and generation
So
for power.
this isn't about electricity capacity. It's actually become a strategic economic issue.
Yeah, 100%. It will kind of the success or failure of the ability to make it work for UK PLC will be huge. So, ultimately, if we can't get the power to these big data center developers, the hyperscalers, they'll just go to somewhere else and do it somewhere else. They'll do it in Germany or France or wherever, and where there is power. It's not just a UK issue. I think the rest of Europe are struggling as well. But I think for us, it's really important as a country that we can do that.
Thank you. Insightful, educational. Love your energy for the new business. And really excited to see where you go over the next 12 months. Like I say, I remember speaking to you when you first started out. How long ago was it? 18 months ago?
Yeah. Well, no, it was probably, we've had the license for 2 years. So yeah, we got it in April 24. So yeah, time's gone really quickly. So
but it's amazing to see the growth. I think it's inspiring to see how you saw this gap in the marketplace. And I wish you and the business the very best of luck. I don't think you need that luck, but very excited to see where it goes. And obviously, anyone who's listening and viewing the podcast today, if you do want to reach out to Simon at Aurora, you can catch him on LinkedIn, and he's very responsive there. And definitely reach out to him. But it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you for coming on, and look forward to catching up over the coming months.
Thanks, Daniel. Really good to be on. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon.